Hello and welcome to Flow by Design, a new podcast series brought to you by Project 4 Learning Lab. My name is Tom, and over the course of this series, I'll be discussing various flow concepts with organisational leaders, gathering their industry insights, exploring the challenges they face, and the ways in which they solve those challenges. In this, our first episode, I'm joined by none other than Project 4's own Keith Howells. Keith is the founder and CEO of Project 4 and has over 20 years of operational and senior leadership experience in multiple sectors, including aerospace, energy, and marine. He's led the development and delivery of multiple complex projects and has significant experience in leading transformational change in organizations. And in this episode, we will explore the 5 types of flow that organizations thrive on, as well as an overview of the 5 enablers that help achieve those flows. Hi, Keith. How are you doing?
Excellent, Tom. What a welcome.
We've got to start somewhere, right? And this is how we're starting. This is how we've chosen to start. And it's a first for Project 4 because we've gone video as well, so partially video.
Well, and we don't talk about our work. So all our previous podcasts have talked to everyone else. So this is a first. We're talking to each other.
And by nature, we are flow of work accelerators, right?
Yeah.
That's how we see ourselves and how we note ourselves. And it felt appropriate to start a podcast that talks about flow.
Yeah. And it's an odyssey. It's a journey into the unknown. So let's see what happens.
I guess, first of all, what is flow to you?
What is flow to me? Interesting. It's many different things to me, and I think I've sort of grappled with it for a while. We have the idea of personal flow, and I think that's so well established now, this idea that you can get so lost in an activity that you lose all track of time and the state of hyper-focus. So that's one definition of flow. And just before the podcast, actually, I was looking up different definitions of flow, and it's quite interesting if you type into Google flow definition, because it has all these moderators afterwards in the, when it suggests what you want to look for. So flow definition in physics, flow definition in psychology, flow definition in business, flow definition in whatever you want. But it's the idea of movement and a change of state and being able to create the conditions under which businesses or organizations or teams or people can deliver with the minimum of friction, the maximum amount of enjoyment and fulfillment, and hopefully fulfill the whole range of stakeholders' needs.
Don't think there's been a comprehensive or as comprehensive definition of flow like that. I think it's deep. We've gone far first.
We've gone too deep too soon.
Too deep too soon. And I guess the core of this podcast is that flow doesn't happen by accident, and it needs to be by design. Hence the name of this podcast. And we break that down further, right? We have decided to go and in our field and say that flow can be multiple things, and we're going to explore some of those today, or explore all of those today, actually. Because there's nothing quite like a podcast about flow without describing flow first. And I think it would be good to explore those from our eyes, and then see from people in industry on what they see and how they can connect to those things, as well as specific enablers to help drive those flow and to help effective flow in that sense.
Yeah, totally. I think it's hard as well, Tom, there's so many models out there that sort of suggest that if you follow these prescriptions, you'll achieve nirvana. And yeah, every context is different, and life is messy, and organizations are messy, and dynamics are messy. And when you get people together, certain things happen. So we want to unpick some of that, I think, and get some real world experience through our guests in terms of the messiness as well as the polish. And let's see what we learn from that.
Absolutely. And I'm sure anyone listening to this will have been through messiness in any degree of work that they've been in. And hopefully we can connect people to that today. So hey, let's get to it. Should we start?
Yeah, let's frame this stuff. I think context matters. So we want flow everywhere, but we've got to think about what needs to flow and where. And so we've broken our flows down. And the first one's innovation flow. So particularly relevant to those circumstances where we want to produce something new that's never been done before. So if we want to introduce a new product to the marketplace or a new service that's complex, we're creating something that doesn't exist. And if we were creating something that did exist, we'd be wasting our time because there'd be no competitive advantage. So for me, innovation flows in that space where we're creating new and we haven't done it before. So we might have development processes, but the thing that we're creating has never been done before. So there's a degree of looseness and ambiguity in that space. So we've got to unpick some of that. And what does that mean when you can't confidently specify the work that's needed because you don't know? So how do we navigate through that fog?
How do we know we're winning?
How do we know we're winning? That's good. And I would say we can break that down into three areas. So we can break that down into product or service attributes. Does the thing do what it's supposed to do? So if we were thinking of a specific product, it might have attributes, performance related attributes. It might have weight, cost, size, a whole bunch of attributes associated with it. And before we've produced anything, we're probably going to model to try and understand what that thing might look like and how well it meets the conditions. How good does it need to be? So target product attributes and how far away we believe our concept or the thing that we're thinking about is from meeting those target attributes. And probably crucially, how much uncertainty exists in our estimate of how well this thing's going to do. Because in this space, burning down uncertainty and being systematic in removing uncertainty is going to help us deliver value. So I would say in this space, value is uncertainty removed. The business attributes. So we've talked about product attributes, business attributes. How much money is this thing going to make us? What sort of margin? What does the market need in terms of volumes? How does this look as an investment proposal? And typically when we start, we might portray confidence in these things because you need to be confident to start these programs. But that probably belies a lot of uncertainty and not possibly being able to know. So again, how can we test those things in the market and how can we test our understanding of the robustness in the business plan to help us focus on systematically removing that stuff? And finally, related, but the program attributes. When does this product or service need to be ready? When does it need to be with the customer to address the market opportunity? Do we have a plan that substantiates that with high levels of confidence? Almost certainly not. So what is it that we can do to understand what's on the critical path and to remove our uncertainty or increase our confidence in those things? Other examples of program attributes might be the cost, program cost. How much investment do we think we're going to need to make? What resources do we think we might need to deliver that? And are we on track to do those things? So we've sort of got this movable thing of product attributes, business attributes, program attributes, all nebulous at the start. We might not even know what we're targeting, let alone our status against it. And then we're sort of moving towards a state where we're crystallizing those things and systematically removing uncertainty.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting. You mentioned the word value, and I would tie that into the concept of winning as well. I would say, are we winning? We probably are when we're delivering value, and we want to know how, or the value that we're delivering, and whether we're on track to meet those program attributes, for example. And one of the key components of that is to try and reduce that risk early. And it's all about finding those uncertainties. So,
Totally, totally. Can we structure our work so that we prioritize the biggest and most significant sources of uncertainty? And can we plan some activities that will reduce that? And can we learn quickly whether those activities have reduced our exposure and our uncertainties? And that would be winning. So I would say winning is uncertainty removal and speed of learning. So teams that learn fast win. And the faster we learn on the things that are most important, the better we're going to perform as an organization.
Absolutely. And it can be quite a daunting thing at the start of these programs because you're probably making a commitment or identifying somewhere you need to be with a product, but you've got a lot of uncertainty to deal with. And the question to you would be, what is the biggest problem that programs might find at the start of that journey? And what would be the best way for them to overcome that issue?
Yeah, a few things happen quite early, I think, in that no program ever gets launched without someone confidently saying this is the right thing to do and that being accepted by a bunch of other stakeholders. So it's a necessary precondition to convey confidence before starting a program. Problem with that is no one can be confident with some of the more innovative programs. So organizations and people get locked into things that they said at the point at which they know least about the program. But it's necessary to start. And then programs start to get people together and start to evaluate what they need to achieve a particular goal. And then they start planning off the back of that. And typically, when you get more people onto programs and you're trying to explore lots of uncertain terrain, you get lots of noise and lots of misalignment. And it's helpful to have more people and more eyes, but it's only helpful if they can be coordinated. And so often organizations grapple with this because they need to be confident. They've started, they get a load of people on board, and then they try and work out what it is they should be doing. And without being systematic in that, you get quite a lot of misalignment very quickly, which leads to stagnation and frustration and all kinds of other things. So being really clear about where is the uncertainty, which ones are more important than others, what decisions do we need to make to get through to the next milestone in this program, who's accountable for those decisions, what information would they need to be able to make those decisions with high confidence, and what work would be necessary to turn unknowns into knowns to help them make decisions. Because if people aren't able to make decisions today, it's because they don't know something. So what are they? What is the work that we need to do to know them? Once we've done the work, do we know them with enough confidence to make the decision? Creating that sort of framework to navigate through this uncertain terrain helps bind decision makers to people who are doing work to remove the uncertainty. And then crucially, if we can sequence those decisions, we make sure that teams aren't working out of order. I think one of my key insights from a past operational role is we had loads of teams that came together to achieve a particular goal. And because there was so much interaction and interdependency between those teams, they were all asking each other for work to give information so that they could do their work. And the whole system got really choked really quickly while everyone was really busy, whilst no one was available to work on the key de-risking strands in the program because they were all following some process that said, to get to this gate, I need to demonstrate this, and to do that, I need this from you. And the process lead time says it takes this long. I think being clear on what value is and where the uncertainty lies, and trying to minimize as much as possible the structure that comes from processes that weren't designed for this sort of phase. Some of the key things, I think, is
I imagine innovation flow, we started with a big one, right? It's a big blocker, I think, in organizations that are designing complex systems and products.
those who are quick with high quality products and services will win. Those that are slow might not last. So, crucial space. So, knowledge flow, I would say, applies in existing products or services where we're not necessarily creating new things, but we're operating existing processes. So, we might have departments working on particular processes like procurement that manage supplier onboarding or switching of suppliers, or they're managing invoicing. purchase order raising, or engineering teams that are focused on product support, or they're focused on small changes to existing products. A whole host of different, typically functional teams operating processes where they're looking to achieve what they would typically call efficiencies. Now, the problem that they face in that is that if you're an accountant and you wanted efficient resources, then efficient resources means that they're utilized 100% of the time. So that's the best way to sweat an asset, as you might call it. If you view people as assets, then let's sweat them hard. Always keep them busy. The problem in this space is that work arrives at different times and it's not at a predictable rate. And the work content is typically variable as well. No two jobs are the same size, even though they're similar and go through a similar process. And so if, as an organization, we seek to maximize the utilization of people, then so that they're always busy, then that means that any time work arrives, it needs to queue. And typically in organizations, work queues grow because the work that's completed isn't completed as quickly as work that arrives. So when we have a imbalance of departures from someone's work pile and arrivals, then work stacks up. And that's a leading indicator that things are going to take longer. Cycle time is going to increase when queues increase because departures aren't balanced with arrivals or vice versa. So that's
Yeah.
knowledge flow.
You almost get to a point of a zombie state, right? Projects when they're maximizing, the queue times are always increasing, and you can get up with big challenges as well. When you have those big queues, which stuff do I work on first? Do I have that in terms of priority, or does it keep shifting? So I see there's a big challenge in knowledge flow.
Yeah, loads of work in progress, loads of projects, some of them really hot this month, some of them been around forever. We're all a bit bored now. Is this still really going on? Do I want to choose this one or this new shiny one? And without that, like you say, that clear prioritization that is tied back to some business case somewhere and some cost of delay or what's the right thing to be working on right now everywhere across the organization. Without that being clear, and if people choose what to work based on stuff, you can guarantee that they're going to have different reasons for making the decisions that they make. And some of those, absolutely, they should, based on local capacity and local resources. But ultimately, you want to make sure that the business is working on the right stuff and everyone everywhere is working on the stuff that's going to progress the needs of the organization. So, yeah, interesting space, knowledge flow.
It is.
Almost always difficult to see where queues are forming in the organization without significant
Absolutely.
intervention.
And particularly when that work's not visualized.
Yes.
If you're visualizing that flow of work, you'll find it hard to recognize that space where you are having those problems in knowledge flow. And as part of that, as part of effective knowledge flow, you need a good team. And when you have a team and you want a good team, you want good team flow as well, right?
Nothing substantive in any organization has been produced by one person working independently. It always takes teams to do things that are significant. And therefore, at the core of every high performing organization are multiple high performing teams. And I think team flow is really interesting because the teams power the delivery performance of an organization. And yet, often in organizations, they're not paid attention to in that we might think about departments as teams, and that might be true if they're engaged in knowledge flow. But if they're developing new things, then where collaboration is key, then we need value focused teams that are configured to systematically reduce uncertainty. So we need some more dynamic, responsive teams And to create that across department boundaries or organizational boundaries requires quite a lot of input and quite a lot of attention. So team flow, creating this state where either innovation or knowledge work or products can flow seamlessly through the organization, requires us to help enable teams to collaborate or cooperate really effectively as work modes, and to maximize the amount of time where they can add value, which means removing interference. And typically organizations, and the larger the organization, the larger the interference gets, typically, are really good at taking value adding time away from people, and by placing requirements on that aren't necessarily prioritized appropriately. And when individuals choose how they spend their time, then you soon find that team members who need to work together really frequently can't interact with each other quickly anymore because they can't find the time to do so. And so often when that happens, you see a rise in meetings. So to talk to each other, we need to arrange a meeting, but there aren't many times in the calendar available. It's going to be in future, so we're delayed before we can talk to each other. We don't use meetings effectively when we get there because we're overloaded. So team flow for me is about creating the conditions under which teams can thrive and taking away a lot of interference and helping them operate at some sort of predictable rhythm. And if we can help teams work at predictable rhythm and create the conditions for them to thrive, then we can test whether having thriving teams operating at a consistent rhythm helps deliver the flow of innovation or the flow of knowledge or the flow of product effectively. And yeah, I think many organizations are expert at creating the conditions under which teams are never going to thrive.
Absolutely. And in particular, high pressure projects, I'd say. And I think a question to you as someone who's been leader of teams in high pressure environments and projects, what's the one thing you would advise to get a group of teams to a position where they're thriving in a high pressure environment?
Yeah, well, what a big question. I think for me, you said what one thing. I'll go with two. One is one is alignment around some common definition of success. If we break success down too far and break it down to team or individual level, then people are less likely to collaborate and give things away. They're more likely to focus on what success means for them. And yet, think about the best experiences you've ever had in work. They'll be when groups of people achieve success through adversity. So I think aligning them around a common definition of success. And then I think the second part for me is about creating the space for within team working and between team working. So focusing on between teams and the handoffs and the synchronization and the collaboration between teams is at least as important as within teams. So when we've got scale, paying attention to the integration as well as the differentiation.
I really like what you said in the first one, the first point you made on in the face of adversity, I think it can really drive teams to think differently, and it's enabling that space for them to do that rather than funneling them down a narrow path where they can't think outside the box, they can't think of different solutions, and then you end up with a bit of stagnation there as well and frustration as a team member, and I think that just comes naturally with it.
And it comes back to the personal flow definition, this just slight imbalance between skill and challenge. You keep developing your skills, but the challenge is just beyond your skill level. And it's been shown that they're the conditions with the absence of interference where you can be in a state of flow. And the same is true for teams. To just create that positive tension, if the challenge is overwhelming, then probably the team are really going to struggle, or the organization or group of teams are going to struggle. If the challenge is broken down to be not quite, doesn't feel like it's achievable, but just then work feels more fulfilling and the sense of achievement feels enriching and is probably innate and intrinsic as opposed to extrinsic. Someone said that was really brilliant, well done, is not as powerful as we all felt that we went through real difficult challenge there, but we came out the other side and we achieved success together. That's team flow.
Absolutely. And looking through innovation, knowledge, and team flow all leads to one thing essentially, which is the product. And product has to flow. And that's our final one. Product flow.
There's another one. I'll surprise you with another one, enterprise flow, but let's deal with product flow first. Yeah, so organizations who are delivering product or service in high volume or product with supporting service. So typically the domain of what's been called operational excellence or lean. But what we're trying to do is enable flow through the relentless elimination of waste. So we know what the work content is, we know what the product or service is, we plan for constant and steady arrival times. So our goal is to systematically eliminate waste to create flow and to minimize the amount of time in switchover between one product line and another. So product flow. Similar to knowledge flow, i.e. knowledge flow and the Kanban method is picking up things that were learned and understood years ago in lean, if I can badge it that. But the difference in knowledge flow is arrival times are more variable and work content is more variable. So we need to move away from the definitions of standard work in product flow more towards can we balance arrivals and departures. So yeah, product flow.
In your experience, Keith, what's the one big blocker to product flow?
It's compartmentalization. The brilliant thing about sophisticated operational excellence frameworks is they decompose work and targets right down to line, cell, almost person, and deal with safety, quality, cost, delivery, people type metrics at stand-ups, but they're exception meetings, i.e. are we on track against target? If we're short, what's the action? What's the problem? What's the action? What's the owner? And that sort of presupposes that those target conditions are set properly and they're flowed down all the way across the supporting part of the organization. And that's often not true. And so what happens in organizations is then occasionally they then go and do some sort of value stream mapping. And then they look at the value stream map and they go, oh my God, our value adding percentage time is like 5%. And 95% of it is waste. And of that, most of it's waiting because the flow isn't balanced across the participating people, cells, lines appropriately. Or if it is, it's not done at the right cadence to support the change in demand. So product flow is a really complex space and huge amounts of complexity in terms of flowing stuff down and creating meaning. But often the abstraction down, the decomposition doesn't always add up to what's required at the top. And I guess that's the continual balance, right? You want clear targets for people that they own, but you want them to sit in the context of a system that delivers the results that you're looking to deliver. Challenge.
Big challenge. So let's surprise everyone then with real final flow.
Surprised you?
Almost fitting together somewhere, right?
It's got to be there. It's the wrapper. It's the wrapper. Much as we've segmented these flows into neat buckets, typically organizations and organizations at scale tend to have to deal with all of these flows. So if they're innovating, then they're doing some innovation flow. If they're operating standard processes, then they're doing knowledge flow. If they manufacture anything or if they provide services, they're doing sort of product flow. They've all got teams. And then the enterprise is, well, how do you balance all these things? How do you balance all these lines? Where do you make the investments? How do you prioritize work across those different value streams? From one quarter or year or budgeting cycle to the next, do these things need to change? Does that mean we need to move people from X to Y? How does this all work in this dynamic system that is making commitments to the external environment? It's got loads of turbulence inside the environment, and then moving stuff. How do we adapt and thrive in that space? And that's really enterprise flow. We want to synchronize our investment and our resources to the biggest value at any point in time without creating carnage by switching everyone every day, which can destroy useful capacity. So enterprise flow, the sum of all the others.
Well, in all seriousness, all organizations, especially big ones, will have to make those big decisions on which flow they have to go down, at which phase of a program. And there's an importance of recognizing where they have to go and how they have to manage the resource, the money, and allocation to these things. And it's real.
Absolutely, absolutely. And trying to decouple those things so that there can be bounded empowerment within these different areas and robustness in terms of estimates. See a lot of organizations that try to over predict, try to be really almost precisely wrong on estimates and then try to hold people to account on those estimates. It's probably not the way. It's probably not how most people would want to spend their time producing forecasts that are wrong and then justifying why they haven't met the forecasts. It's probably not where the value is. So creating this system that creates real clarity over what the expectation is in exchange for this investment or this resource, we get these valuable outcomes across the whole patch, but not being so tied to very specific things, unless that's absolutely necessary to meet a commitment that's been made. Really difficult challenge, I think, in all organizations.
We have to go deep on these things. I think there's a lot to these elements of flow. And through this series, I think we'll be exploring lots of these different types of flow with people in industry. And as part of our model, we recommend or we demonstrate that there are enablers to these flows, right? And we have 5 of those.
There are common characteristics and common things that teams and groups of people need to remove friction or to reduce friction and to enable things to flow. We've neatly segmented them into 5 areas. Irrespective of the context that we talked about, we're always seeking to use these 5 things. So the first enabler is to connect strategy to action. Does everyone everywhere understand what success looks like and the contribution that they're making towards it? That sounds easy and logical and straightforward, and yet really challenging often.
It's a helpful thing to consider when you're answering the question of, are we winning or are we delivering value?
Yeah, yeah. And so, are we winning? Outcomes. Can we describe outcomes? We'll probably want to relate outcomes to outputs. What are the things that people or teams need to deliver to achieve those outcomes that we desire? So, connect strategy to action and help everyone understand whether we're winning and the contribution they're making, and connect outcomes to outputs so that we can decompose them.
One of the big enablers that we want, especially in big organizations, but everywhere, is transparency. And one of those enablers is then to create transparency because it's crucial in business, I think.
Exactly. Enabler to create transparency. Really interesting, I think. Often I've been challenged to say, what do you mean by transparency? And then I will say, well, let's take the state of hyper transparency. Everyone everywhere knows everything that's going on in the business at any time, and it's always correct. And then that just blows people's minds because then they go, you are smoking something absolutely unachievable that's never been seen, never been known. And whilst that might be a desirable future state or perfect future state, and we could argue about that, how far to go, taking steps towards more transparency enables people to make faster, better decisions. and the to realize their potential. And it also invites others to contribute their knowledge where the invitation isn't clear. So I talked about value stream mapping earlier. One of the great things about any sort of mapping activity is it brings a picture from multiple people into one place, and it sparks a load of thoughts and insights and perspectives that wouldn't have been triggered without putting that stuff in one place. So if we can create transparency of work, progress, performance across the organization, then we create alignment. We unlock latent potential, but we accelerate decision making. So we help people make better decisions because they understand status and what's going on at the whole and the contribution.
Absolutely. I think those first two enablers go hand in hand as well for identifying work that can be ultimately dropped. You find organizations will have projects that are resource limited, budget limited, and somewhere at some point they've got to make that decision. And if you have those two things, you're on a good journey to figuring out the work you ultimately don't need to do now.
Yeah. What a great way of putting it. The work you don't need to do now. It sort of implies a closed loop cycle. As you were talking, I was thinking many organizations understandably have this mantra of either promises made, promises kept, or, do what you said you would, or make a commitment, tell someone at some point in time that you're going to do something. And then because most people in work are really responsible and want to do a good job, then they feel committed to deliver that commitment. And often the situation changes, other things happen, this thing becomes not as important as those things. And are those things revisited? Is that thing changed as a result of everything else that's going on? Not necessarily. It's just surfacing that stuff and helping to focus on, based on where we're at now, what is it that's the next most useful, valuable thing we can do? Probably is liberating and scary for many.
Absolutely. So let's go on to the third enabler then. One I am particularly a big fan of. Uh, it's establishing a collaboration cadence.
Yeah, so getting people to work together. I know you spent a lot of your recent working life in coaching and supporting teams to change the pattern of how they work together. So collaboration cadence, can we set a rhythm and structure of our team interactions so that they're regular, predictable, synchronized, and help teams plan, deliver, reflect on what they've done, and then identify opportunities for improvement? I don't know what you see as the magic in that, Tom, or what some of the challenges are with teams, because it's not normal, is it?
It's not normal, no. Sometimes the most powerful thing is to get the right people in the room, having the right conversation at the right time. And doing that at cadence gives people the comfort and confidence that they're coming to the right things. I'm saying rights there a lot, but there's importance to that. The biggest hurdle to that sometimes with teams in organizations is they feel they have lots of meetings already, but sometimes that's part of the problem. And the meetings that they're in are non-focused, they're non-driven, and there's no action at the end of it. I'm sure we've all been in meetings where you come out the end of it going, not quite sure why I was there. What have I got out of that? I just listened to a lot of people saying stuff. And if you get those focus meetings at cadence, it builds a good atmosphere with the team and good relationships with people. And ultimately, you feel more comfortable to talk about the difficult stuff as well. And dialogue's really important in this, and the healthy tension you want to build, because then those teams will want to perform and deliver what they need to.
Yeah, totally, totally. There's good research as well that says having predictable rhythms in that being being almost routine and automatic in terms of knowing what's happening when calms the nervous system and allows teams to be more focused and productive by focusing on where the challenge really is or needs to be, which is in the work they're doing, not the organizational dynamics and drag that's going on. So I think that's really interesting as well, in that it's something that's often understated.
Absolutely. And I'm sure we were going to dive more into that as an enabler through this series. The next enabler,
Enable people to win together. So interesting.
I love it as a statement. I love it as a statement because I don't think people think about it.
No, no. I often ask people, it's almost become a tick of mine to say, are you winning? And more often than not, they go, yeah, yeah, I think so. And I find it interesting in that it's not an automatic response. It's taken some thinking. And often at the end of that thinking, they're not sure, which suggests maybe that it's not clear what winning means for them. And it could take many different definitions, right? But it's not clear. And if you ask people, it's not front of their mind. So I think interesting, really interesting. But this sort of dives into what we were talking about earlier. Would you rather win on your own or win with others? And typically, most people would reflect on their best achievements in life, and it will be things that they've done with others rather than things they've done for themselves. And that's because we're social, we're social beings. Yeah, creating the conditions for people to win, whether that's the team structure and clarity, whether that's psychological safety, dependability, accountability, whether that's just coaching that helps them adapt how they interact together back to the goals and to remove some of the interference or impediments to flow or things that stop work moving. All of those things can help enable people to win together or to develop their skills.
Yeah, I find it a really powerful one that I don't think many organizations will explicitly think about or say out loud. It's that enablement for people to win together. So it's a really good one here. And hey, let's complete the set.
Final one, enabler 5, strive for better. So the idea of marginal gains has been around for a long time. 1% every day for a year is 37.4 times improvement or whatever it is. But just the thinking way to say, okay, well, we've gone through this cycle together. What have we learned from that? What's going to make things better in the next cycle? Whatever it is, could be tiny, could be huge, could be personal, could be team based, could be organizational based, could be hygiene based. But this idea of, can we keep striving for better? Can we drive continuous improvement, be data driven to look at where the opportunities exist and keep challenging the status quo? I think there's enough in organizations that without continuous input, we revert to the lowest energy state, the state where, it's fine. If we don't do this, then it's fine. It's okay. And you can see it in Gallup surveys. So state of the organization, the annual Gallup surveys, where they say there are at least as many people who are disengaged, actively disengaged in the organization. So actively working against the aims of the organization, than actively engaged. And many people sit in the middle of that spectrum. And this is that reversion to the lowest energy state. And then people get bored and they try and find other ways to amuse themselves. So for me, this strive for better, if we can look for opportunities small that don't need to be painful to just do more, just try stuff and learn, then we lift the energy and we bounce off each other to achieve better things.
Yeah. Continuous improvement is so important. And it's you mentioned it, it's trying to think of the small scale change and not trying to deliver that wholesale massive thing at once because you never get there. You never get around to implementing what you need to. And in particularly in teams, it ties everything together, right? It's if you're going to do these things at cadence and you're going to find those right points at cadence to improve, and then you're going to enable people to win together. It's all going to tie in with each other.
Totally, Tom. And it's automatic. You don't need to think, oh my God, we've got this problem. So let's look at the data and let's analyze it and let's start a project and let's develop a plan and let's get some people and that's. You've got these things that are part of the collaboration cadence that say, okay, let's look at how we could do better. Which of those could we do in the next cycle? Cool, let's do that. Has that made things better? you shorten the feedback loops as well between thing that we've tried as an experiment and whether it's made something better. And that's always good.
Absolutely. Hey, what a great way to finish, I think, there. And what an opening. We've gone through all the flows and enablers, Keith. We've done it.
Who knew we could go so deep and so broad in
Flows and enablers.
Absolutely.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Flow by Design. If you'd like to find Flow in your organisation, contact us at info@p4learninglab.com. In the next episode, I'll once again be joined by Keith as we explore removing friction in organisations. See you there.